welcome back once again to our continuing series on the glories of Shri Vrindavan Dham. Happy to be back with you after a little absence. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya, Krishna Pashtaya Bhutale, Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swaminiti Namane, Namaste Saraswati Deve, Gauravani Pacharane, Nivishesha, Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarane. Excuse me, I have a little bit of a cold today, but no problem. Yes, you can see we're in a different environment here. The summer heat is coming on in India now. It's quite intense, especially where I was staying in near to Delhi, just outside of Vrindavan. So me and my team, we moved to a hill station in the mountains in Maharashtra. Very beautiful place. Little house we have here in the mountain. It's very cool during the day, and this gives me the opportunity to focus on my studies and, of course, my service to all of you delivering these lectures. You can see just behind me a big mountain, and we visited there. There's a cave where the great sage Loma Rishi achieved perfection, and on top of that mountain there's a well that was dug by the Pandavas when they were passing through this area during their exile. And there's also 52 kunds, 52 lakes up there. And there's lots of birds and animals and butterflies. You know, it's a very idyllic place. I'm very grateful that Krishna's given us this facility. So we'll be here for the summer. We'll miss the heat of the plains up here in the mountains. So again, we're back after a 14-day break, and I'm ready to continue exploring our beloved Sri Vrindavan Dham by Shabda Brahma, transcendental sound vibration. And as we've heard before, in Vrindavan, there are 660 billion holy places. And, you know, after this break, I couldn't decide which one to start with. So I took a big list. I made a big list of the some of the holy places in Vrindavan that we haven't visited yet. And I closed my eyes, and then I put my finger on the list. And I opened up my eyes, and what did I see? My finger was on the sacred tirtha of Sauraka. And I went, Sauraka? What's that Leelastan, Sauraka? So there was a little text below it, and I looked closely, and I was surprised to see that it's the place where the famous sage Saubhari Muni lived on a small hill by the shore of the Yamuna River. And as many of us know, that's where he performed great austerities in the water of the Yamuna River. And then I looked, a little closer at the text, and I was stunned by something. Not just surprised, I was stunned to see that Saubhari Muni, he appeared on the Falguna Krishna Trayodashi, which according to our Vedic calendar is celebrated today, April 9th, 2021. In other words, today's the official celebration day of the appearance of Saubhari Muni. What kind of coincidence is that? I just closed my eyes and put my finger down. And with a little help from a friend, I also found Saubhari Muni's pranam mantra. How important are these pranam mantras? They describe to us the person's different characteristics, their bhav, their mood in devotional service, some of their accomplishments. It just, I came across it. What does it say in the Holy Bible? I think it's Matthew 7:7. Ask, and it shall be given. Seek, and ye shall find. Knock, and it shall be open unto you. So here it is. Here's the pranamanta for Saubhari Muni. Saubhari Muni Sharadula Sarvesham Sharanapada Shri Braja Shara Neha Me Kripaya Paripuryatam. O Saubhari, O tiger amongst sages, O shelter giver of all living entities, by your mercy, please completely fulfill my desire to attain shelter in Sri Vrindavan Dham. Wow. Now, that pranamanta was composed by my dear friend Hari Prasad Das of the GBC Shastra Committee recently, so we thank him for that. So, it seems to be Krishna's plan, not chance, that today we will be speaking on Shonoraka and the sage who lived there, Saubhari Muni. Now, over these 14 days, I did what I wanted to do. I chanted a lot, but I couldn't keep away from the books. So, from extensive research, I was able to determine that our Saubhari Muni actually lived in the Satya Yuga. And I was also able to find out a little bit of the history of his birth, which we're celebrating today. And it's very interesting. First of all, I learned that his father's name was Kanva Muni. Kanva Muni. And Kanva Muni himself was the son of the sage Gora. That's spelled Ghora. And Gora was the grandson of Lord Brahma. So we're going way back in time here. Now, to connect everything to a little prehistory to his birth or his appearance, Saubhari Muni. Most of us are aware of the demon Vritasura from our studies in the 6th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. And without going into too much detail, we know that at one point Vritasura was giving a lot of trouble to the sages throughout the universe. And as a result, Lord Indra, Indradev, and the demigods, they approached a very powerful sage by the name of Dadichi for help. And they made a very unusual request of him. They asked him for his bones in order to make a special weapon with which to kill Vritasura. Let us always remember that these sages are transcendental personalities, and as such their bodies, you could say, become spiritualized. So they asked him for his bones to make a weapon to kill this Vritasura. So Dadichi agreed. Compassionate sage, he agreed. He agreed to sacrifice his bones and obviously his life to save the entire universe, to protect the sadhus. So then the demigods, they made a very powerful weapon. It's called Vajram, V-A-J-R-A-M, Vajram, or literally that means like a very powerful thunderbolt. They made that thunderbolt from the bones of Dadichi. And by helping the demigods to defeat this demon Vritasura, Dadichi was and is revered amongst all rishis and sages for his selflessness. Materialistic people tend to be selfish and realized souls, knowing the temporary nature of this world and the positive alternative of the spiritual world. They're very selfless in the sense that they'll do whatever they can to help the people get out of here and go back to the spiritual world. So for sadhus, Dadichi symbolizes the notion that, quote, no sacrifice is too great in order to defend and protect Dharma. I got that from one of the Vedas, the Rig Veda, I think. No sacrifice is too great in order to defend and protect Dharma. So interestingly, this pastime of Dadichi's sacrifice, I was reading, it's just a side note, inspired the Indian military in 1950 to establish the prestigious Paramvir Chakra. It's a medal or an award that they give to brave soldiers And Paramvir Chakra translates as the greatest of the ultimate brave. And it's actually India's highest military award for gallantry, you could say. And it's most often awarded posthumously for exceptional courage in battle. In other words, those who may die in battle. Anyway, Dadichi's sacrifice is appreciated even in modern times. So now again, getting back to Srimad Bhagavatam, 6th canto. We know that Indradev, he actually killed Vritasura with that thunderbolt weapon. It's a nice battle description if you want to go in or read the 6th canto. He was able to kill this demon, a demon of sorts, demon of Vritasura, with this powerful thunderbolt. But that wasn't the end of it. Further research in a few other shastras, I found out that after the thunderbolt struck down Vritasura, the weapon, it's described, the weapon didn't calm down. The weapon didn't calm down. But instead, that thunderbolt started burning the entire universe. Now, seeing this, Narada Muni enters the scene. Narada Muni and the demigods, they approached Lord Vishnu, because this was a big problem now. The universe is going to be burned up. So they quickly approached Lord Vishnu, and they asked him, what's the remedy? What can we do? So Lord Vishnu, he told Narada Muni and the demigods to find a sage of equal caliber as Dadichi, who could personally absorb the potency of the thunderbolt weapon and thus calm it down. Problem solved. Absorb the potency of the weapon. So all the demigods looked at Narada Muni, like, who do you think can do that? Who's on equal level with Dadichi? So Narada Muni thought for a while, and then he said, I suggest that we approach the great sage Kanva Muni. Now remember, earlier in the lecture we mentioned Kanva Muni as the father of Saubhari Muni. So he said, let's go to see Kanva Muni, who lives in the forest of Braj in Vrindavan, along with his pregnant wife, because Saubhari was not born yet, as you'll see. So we'll go meet Kanva Muni in Vrindavan along with his pregnant wife. So when all the demigods and Narada Muni approached Kanva Muni in Vrindavan, again, like a compassionate, saintly person, he agreed to absorb the potency of the thunderbolt weapon to save the universe. So what he did is he went and he sat under a banyan tree in very deep meditation. And like all these demigods, it's a beautiful description. All these demigods are just, waiting patiently as the weapon is burning up some part of the universe. They're waiting there, watching Kanva Muni as he's going into samadhi. And all of a sudden, all the demigods watched in wonder as Kanva Muni mystically absorbed the full potency of that powerful thunderbolt weapon. But that's not all. And then to everyone's amazement, Kanva Muni transferred the full potency of that thunderbolt weapon to his unborn son in the womb of his wife. His wife was standing there. So then Kanva Muni, he looked at the womb, the mother's pregnant, and he transferred the potency of that weapon to the son, the unborn son. And soon after, that son was born, and they named him Saubhari, who later became Saubhari Muni, who you could say was invested with the full potency of that Vajra, that thunderbolt weapon, a weapon created from the bones of the mystic sage, Dadichi, a weapon that killed the demon Vritasura and had the potential to burn the entire universe to ashes. So that, my dear devotees, is an introduction to this Saubhari Muni, whose appearance we're observing today by having this katha, by Krishna's mercy. Hare Krishna. So in time, as this incredible boy grew up in Braj, in one of the 12 forests of Vrindavan, he learned, it's described, all the secrets of the Vedas from his father, Kanva Muni, especially for whatever reason he learned the Rig Veda. Now, when he finished his studies, he was in his, he was about, I think in his mid-teens, maybe 16 or 17 actually, finished his studies. And what did he do? What do, young people do when they finish their studies, generally like college or university? Well, they go out and they get a job and they start their career in the world. But what did this young boy, Saubhari Muni, do? He walked into the Yamuna River, and he sat at the bottom of the river, and he spent 1,000 years underwater performing intense dhyana yoga. It's described, dhyana yoga. That's what he did after he graduated. Now, during Saubhari Muni's underwater meditation, you could say, there happened to be a very severe drought, meaning a lack of water, no water, in the kingdom of Ayodhya. Ayodhya, that's where Lord Ramchandra appeared. And of course, we know that Ayodhya is quite far from Vrindavan. Vrindavan is, you could say, northwest India, and Ayodhya is northeast India. So there was a big drought going on. And at that time, the king of Ayodhya, his name was Maharaj Mandata. Just to say the names of these illustrious personalities, you can feel your heart becoming purified. Mandata Maharaj. And he was a special person for many reasons, but I was reading that he's the father of Ambarish Maharaj and also King Muchukunda, Mandata Maharaj. Now, he's the king and there's this drought, there's no water, people are actually starving. The crops can't be watered, they can't grow. It's a very difficult situation. So he prayed to the demigods for help, prayed to the Supreme Lord for help. And Narada Muni appeared. And Narada Muni said to Mandata Maharaj, you just hold one special yajna. I'll give you the name of this yajna, how to perform this yajna, and the drought will disappear. The monsoon will come, the rains will come. But it's very important, the priest. And for this particular yajna, you should request the help of Saubhari Muni, or Saubhari Muni. And so the king said, well, where does he live? So Narada Muni said, he lives in Braj. How do I find him? Oh, he's meditating under the water. So the king went. Mandata Maharaj, you'll see later he becomes a Muni. Mandata Maharaj, he traveled from Ayodhya to Vrindavan, and he went into the Yamuna River. Somehow he had darshan with Saubhari Muni. And he requested, sir, please, my kingdom is a huge drought, citizens are suffering. Narada Muni said, we do one yajna. Can you be the priest? So Saubhari Muni agreed. Again, you see this compassionate nature of the sadhus. So he came out of the water, and there on the banks of the Yamuna, he performed a month-long yajna. And at the very end, just as, svaha, the grains went in, the drought finished and the monsoons came. Such a wonderful culture we have, Vedic culture. So then, Mandata Maharaj was so grateful. We'll see a little bit later. He was so grateful to Saubhari Muni. And he expressed his gratitude and he went back to Ayodhya. And Saubhari Muni went back in the Yamuna for his meditation. Now, as the pastimes evolve, it was around this time that very, very far away, in an island called Ramanakadweep, such beautiful sound, Sanskrit, Ramanakadweep. And I looked up, where's this Ramanakadweep? And you know what? I found out it's the island of Fiji. It's the island of Fiji, Ramanakadweep, because we know that previously in Vedic culture, let us say, the Vedic culture was all over the world. We read in Srimad Bhagavatam, first canto, that Maharaj Yudhishthira ascended the throne as emperor, and he was emperor of the whole world. So everything was connected in those days. So in this island of Fiji, Ramanakadweep, I was reading that Garuda, Lord Vishnu's giant eagle, whom he rides on, he travels on Garuda, he was often coming to this island, to Fiji, because there were many snakes there. And what do eagles eat? Eagles eat snakes. They eat fish, or what have you. So Garuda was going there, and he was eating the snakes. Now the leader of these snakes was the famous Kaliya serpent. Kaliya. We know Kaliya very well. We give a long lecture on Kaliya, how he was chastised by Krishna in the Yamuna River. So that time, that's where Kaliya was living. So when Garuda would come to eat the snakes, Kaliya, being the leader of all those snakes, he would always engage in combat. They'd have big fights in the air. I was reading the Garga Samhita, in immense battles. And just as a note of interest, I was reading in Garga Samhita that during one of their fights between Kaliya and Garuda over Fiji, two very beautiful living entities were created. How's that? It's described in Garga Samhita. Taksha praksha cha pita o, bhuma dvo bijay ratu, ekena bar hino bhumvam, nilakanta duita yata. Quote, at that time, meaning during their combat, two birds were created and born from Garuda's wings. They appeared from his wings, namely the beautiful Peacock and the illustrious Magpie. Yeah, it's just interesting. When you do this research, you find so many things. I think, I don't have time to share that. I won't have time to share that, but I wanted to share this. And Garga Samhita goes on to say, Tesham tu darshanam punyam, sarvakama phalapadam, shukla daksho pati lindra, dasam yamas ivan asyatat. Quote, O Lord of Mithila, the adoration of both these birds on the 10th day of the bright fortnight of Ashvin is considered to be auspicious and fulfills all desires of the performer. Of course, that's not necessarily in our realm of bhakti, pure devotion to the Lord, but it's something interesting. One can amass some pious credit. On that particular day, on the 10th day of the bright fortnight of Asvin, if one adores these two species of birds, the peacock and the magpie, you get some credit. So the 10th day of the bright fortnight of Asvin is also known as Vijay Dashami. Yeah, the day that Ram conquered Ravana. And I looked it up. This year, the 10th day of the bright fortnight of Asvin, it falls on October 15th. So you might, add to your spiritual bank account or your pious credits. Mark that on your calendar. You can adore the peacock and the magpie. Of course, we all know how beautiful is the peacock because it's so much part of our culture. But actually the magpie is also part of our Vedic culture, you could say. Magpies are actually different parts of the world, but I know here, since I came to this mountain, which you see behind me, lots of magpies. The magpie, they have here they have a blue body with a black throat and a white chest, and their tails are long and blue with some white tips, and their heads are black with a slight amount of blue on their cheeks. In fact, there's one sitting outside here right now, out the door. I'm describing you. Anyway, we don't want to get too far off the story. Anyway, those two birds were produced from one particular battle that Kaliya, the serpent, had with Garuda at Fiji. So Garuda's very powerful. He's in a category of his own, actually. He's a transcendental personality. And he was eating more snakes than, they could defend themselves. So finally, these snakes, they eventually approached Anantashesha for help. And Lord Ananta told them, okay, well, how are you going to solve this problem? Well, in this particular case, I'm recommending you go to Braj and you seek the shelter of a great sage, a powerful sage, Saubhari Muni. And there's a beautiful description of how Anantashesha is describing Saubhari Muni. He's glorifying him. As I remember one thing he said, he's an all-merciful sage. And he also told the snakes that Saubhari Muni, one of his good qualities is that he feeds little pieces of dough to the fish in the Yamuna each day because he's living under the water. So, who is associates under the water is the fish. So he feeds them little dough every day out of his kindness, part of his routine, Anantashesha said. So, the snakes, they left Ramanakadweep. They left Fiji, and they came to Vrindavan, and they took shelter of Saubhari Muni. Now, when the snakes told Saubhari Muni how Garuda was eating them in Ramanakadweep in Fiji, and that they were scared he might follow them to Vrindavan to eat them, Saubhari Muni immediately took his Brahman thread, touched water, and pronounced a curse on Garuda. That's how they did it in those days. You take your Brahman thread, tie it on your thumb, you touch some sacred water, Yamuna or the Ganges, Kaveri River, you make your curse. So he cursed him, quote, that if Garuda ever comes to Vrindavan, he will be immediately burnt to ashes. As he enters into the transcendental abode, he'll be flying in, and poof, become ashes. Of course, that's not possible because he's who he is. He's a transcendental personality. But this was the mistake of Saubhari Muni, to curse a great personality. But out of his allegiance to the snakes, his affection for the snakes, from that day on, the sages in Vrindavan, they gave him another name, Saubhari Muni. He was famous as Ahivasi. They'd come to greet him, oh, Ahivasi. What does that mean? It means he who gives shelter to Ahi snakes. And I also read that area where Saubhari Muni stayed on the Yamuna River, we'll go there on our next Kartik, we know where that is. That became known as Ahivasa. Ahivasa means the place that shelters snakes. So good for the snakes, but when you go there, watch out where you step, because there's lots of snakes. Now, as we know, there's a slightly different version of this pastime. We know from Krishna Book and Bhagavatam. Different versions we find sometimes in these leelas because, well, one explanation is they happen again and again in different kalpas, or they may happen again and again in different kalpas, so there's slightly different versions sometimes. I know in the Nrsimha Purana, I was reading recently, how Nrsingadev appears in different ages, and sometimes he doesn't come out of a pillar. Nrsinga Purana said one time he came out of a flower vase. Another time I read he just walked into town, came in the palace and killed Hiranyakashipu. So there's different versions sometimes, which is fine. So a slightly different version of this pastime we know from Krishna book and Bhagavatam, and that is that it states that Saubhari Muni had once cursed Garuda for coming to Vrindavan and eating fish in the Yamuna river. He cursed him at that time. The curse is actually there in the Bhagavatam. Minam adyat anan atra yad yatsi tvam balad vitat tadaiva prana narashte bhuyan me shapatashtoram. O king of birds, if from today you eat the fish here, you will die at once. That is my curse. So therefore, Garuda wasn't coming. But in either version, either, Saubhari Muni cursing Garuda for eating snakes or for eating fish, the acharyas say again that he was guilty of Vaishnava aparat, offending a great devotee of the Lord. We know that's the first offense to the holy names, which we take very seriously, the 10 offenses to the holy names. The first one is to blaspheme a devotee who's dedicated his or her life to preaching the glories of the Lord. Now, in this particular case, the acharyas, they comment that Saubhari Muni's sympathy for the snakes and the fish that he was trying to protect was, quote, misplaced compassion. It was compassion, but it was misplaced compassion. It's okay, it's fine to be compassionate to any living creature, but not at the expense of offending a great devotee of the Lord, like Garuda. Again, Garuda is an eagle, and eagles, they eat snakes and fish. That's what they eat. So they say that, he took the side of these creatures, which is okay, but in doing so he cursed Garuda. So they say that's a misplaced compassion. It's interesting, misplaced compassion. Yeah, because how great a devotee is Garuda? To understand how great a devotee Garuda is, again we can refer to Guru Shastra and Sadhu. 6th canto, 8th chapter, text 29. Garudo Bhagavan Stotra Stobas Chando Maya Prabhu Rak Sat Ashesha Rich Rebyo Vishvakshena Sva Namabi. Quote, this is important. Lord Garuda, the carrier of Lord Vishnu, is the most worshipable Lord, for he is as powerful as the Supreme Lord himself. He is the personified Vedas and is worshipped by selected verses. May he protect us from all dangerous conditions, and may Lord Vishvakshena, the personality of Godhead, also protect us from all dangers by the chanting of his holy names. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So, yes, you can see how great is Garuda. And of course, in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna mentions Garuda. Vainate yascha pakshinam, he says. Amongst birds, I am Garuda. And as we mentioned, Garuda's seva, his service to Lord Vishnu, is to carry him, transport him on his back to different places. And therefore, he has the prestigious title amongst sadhus and rishis. When they talk about Garuda, what do they say? Oh, that transcendental prince of all carriers. The sadhus, they say, Garuda, he's the transcendental prince of all carriers. So wonderful. So, because of this aparat, this Vaishnava aparat, this offense by Saubhari Muni, some reaction had to come. I remember in Australia, they say what goes around comes around. That's karma. Actually, I read something interesting last night. It's not a shloka, but it's relevant here. It's a little subtle. Quote, "You'll never understand the damage you did to someone until the same is done to you. That's why I am here. Signed, Karma." Did you catch that? You'll never understand the damage you did to someone until the same is done to you. That's why I'm here. Signed, Karma. Karma. And so it happened one day that our dear Saubhari Muni, the hardest lessons are the ones best learned. Sometimes we see transcendentalists, they go through these type of difficulties. While meditating underwater, he saw a pair of fish mating. Fish mating. But because of the offense, he became weak in his spiritual strength, which caused lust to appear within his heart. It is lust only, Arjuna, which is the all-devouring sinful enemy in this world. It's our public enemy number one for devotees, you could say. And he fell down, as we say in ISKCON, he fell down. And at that point, Saubhari Muni immediately, he walked out of the water, Shastra describes, with a desire for female association, companionship. He desired to be married. So how did he go about that? It's interesting. To begin with, by dint of his mystic powers, although he had a fall down, apparently he didn't lose all his spiritual tejas, because he'd accumulated so much in 1,000 years. So by dint of his mystic powers, he transformed his old and wrinkly body into that of a handsome youth. You can imagine how wrinkly he was, right? Because when you're in the water for a long time, you're swimming or whatever, and you notice your skin gets wrinkly. So speaking for 1,000 years and how old you are. But by mystic city, handsome boy, well, young man. So what did he do? He went to Ayodhya. He went from Vrindavan to Ayodhya to see that person whom he had helped immensely, Mandata Maharaj, who I was reading by this time had become emperor of the whole world. Mandata Maharaj became emperor of the whole world. And it's described he was still very indebted to Saubhari Muni for resolving that great drought previously in Ayodhya. So upon arriving in Ayodhya, Saubhari Muni went to the palace and he met the king, and he asked the king to give him one of his daughters in marriage. The king had 50 daughters. So please give me one of your daughters. But it's described that Mandata Maharaj was so grateful to Saubhari Muni for what he'd done previously, correcting the drought. He gave all 50 of all the princesses, all his daughters he gave in marriage to Saubhari Muni. So I was wondering, how could all these girls marry one guy? But I was reading that infatuated by his appearance as a handsome youth, so handsome they'd never seen before by his mystic powers, all 50 princesses happily accepted him as their husband. And so then Saubhari Muni took all of his 50 wives back to Vrindavan. A wise choice. He's a sadhu. He just slipped. But you can slip and pick yourself up again. In my travels, I once met a Muslim priest in Uzbekistan. We became very good friends, actually. I still write to him. He said to me, Maharaj, in your tradition, do your followers, do your people in your tradition, do they sometimes fall down or, do some sin, he said, and fall away? I said, yes, it happens. He said it also happens in our Islamic tradition. And he said, you know what we tell them? I said, what? He says, we tell such persons, if you fall down 8 times, pick yourself up 9 times. Come back. And that's the way it should be, and we should be willing to help those who have left the flock to come back under the shelter of Prabhupada's lotus feet and Radhesham. So Saubhari Muni, he had fallen, but hadn't fallen to the point where he forgot about Braj. So he took all 50 wives back to Vrindavan. And on the northern bank of the Manasi Ganga, in the town of Govardhan, it's described that, quote, on the strength of his previous austerities and the perfection of his chanting mantras, he manifested an opulent residence. At the foot of Govardhan Hill, he manifested an opulent residence, replete with, parks and gardens, clear water lakes, all of this. And then he, how did it go? He expanded his body into 50 duplicate images, it's described. Krishna can expand his form, transcendental form, into 16,108 forms to enjoy with his wives and Dwarka, but each one of those forms is doing something different. But when a yogi expands his form, each of those forms does the same thing. That's the difference between the jiva and the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Anyway, he expanded 50 ways to be with the 50 princesses, and they were happy. And they would stroll through those gardens. The gardens were described as, fragrant with varieties of flowers, opulent with singing birds and humming bees, it's a common phrase, and always resounding with the expert performances of professional musicians. And what else did I read? That his residence was staffed with very well-dressed maidservants and valets, and furnished with, opulent beds and seats decorated with valuable gems, ornaments in the walls, like pearls and jewels and diamonds and sapphires in the walls, and wonderful bathing facilities. And then that particular part of the Shastra concludes, and all the trappings of a royal household. All the trappings of a royal household. So now, while our Saubhari Muni was, quote unquote, enjoying life like this, it so happened that one day, Mandata Maharaj, the emperor of the world, came to visit his 50 daughters, as fathers do. But when he saw how Saubhari Muni had become entangled in materialistic life, that had a big impression in his heart. A big impression. At that moment, that was the moment, he decided to abandon his position as emperor of the world. He kind of connected the two. He saw how his friend, Saubhari Muni, was getting entangled. So he thought, that can happen to me. So they did this to the kings in Vedic age. At a certain point, they left their prestigious position and everything that connected to it, and they left for the path of transcendence. So this king, he decided to go to the Himalayan mountains to become self-realized, to become a lover of God, of Krishna. The Shastra says, quote, he suddenly understood that austerity and penance offer greater rewards than those won by royal influence. Give you a moment to reflect on that. He suddenly understood that austerity and penance offer greater rewards than those won by royal influence. I don't think it's easy for someone in such a position to come to the stage of wanting to renounce this world and become a yogi, a mystic, a bhakta. But that was the culture. So I think because that was the culture. That framework made it easier for people to become Krishna conscious. Now Kali Yuga there's no hopes. There's only the chanting of the holy names and the mercy of Srila Prabhupada to save the world from the course that's going on now. So that was his mood. Now, despite the fact that Saubhari Muni was living this life of great opulence, Mandata Maharaj still had great respect for him as a spiritual personality because, well, he's displaying all these mystic powers. And they were good friends. He respected him as a sadhu. So actually, the king requested Saubhari Muni to give him a mantra or mantras that would protect him on his spiritual path. Remember the statement by Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur that the road to Braj is full of brambles and thorns, meaning it may not be so easy. Going back to Godhead, yes, chanting, dancing, prasadam, sadhu sangha, but we all know that there's really the dangers are within our heart. The attachments we have to this world, that's what causes us pain. And that may sometimes make us go off the path, as it did Saubhari Muni. So this, realizing the reality ahead of him, in warfare you're always taught that never underestimate the strength of your enemy. If you're going to have a battle, okay, you want to go into battle, but you should send your spies out, you should send out different, and you should estimate what is the nature of, what was the power of your enemy. And if it's greater, don't attack. So who are we dealing with? As transcendentalists, we're dealing with Maya Devi. She's an expansion of, Yoga Maya in the spiritual world. She's no less potent. And she has that thankless task of keeping the fallen conditioned souls here in the material world until they express some real sincerity to be Krishna's devotees again. And then she releases the curtain of illusion like that. So we have it can be a dangerous path. I remember one time in London, Prabhupada told one of my godbrothers, he said, your problem is you're not afraid of Maya. Because he was kind of dabbling a little bit in some sense gratification, I remember, and Prabhupada noticed that. He said, your problem, you're not afraid of Maya. So we should know what is our opposition, and we should know how to deflect her or avoid her. And the best way to do that is to take shelter of Krishna. And the easiest way to take shelter of Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So the king, he understood. Now he's taken to the path of transcendence, and there can be some slip-ups, some dangers on the way. So he wanted a mantra. Because mantras are very powerful. As I've mentioned earlier, or in a previous lecture actually. Prabhupada told one of my godbrothers one time, who told me personally, Prabhupada said, in the age of Kali, although everything deteriorates under the influence of this age of Kali Yuga, two things never lose their potency. Mantras and jewels, a proper jewel. As astrologers they sometimes use. A jewel, proper jewel never loses potency. Mantras in the age of Kali, they don't lose potency. Kaler dosha nidhe rajan asayeka mahaguna kirtanadeva krishnasya mukta sangha paramvachat. And then Maharaj Parikshit was told by Shukadeva Goswami that in the age of Kali, there's nothing left, nothing good is left. But there's one good thing left in this age, and that is that by the chanting of the names of Krishna, one can achieve perfection and go back to the spiritual world. So fortunate we are that in the mass of peoples, 7 billion people on this planet, we have knowledge of the value of this mantra which has been given to us by our gurus, this most precious gift given to us by Srila Prabhupada. So knowing the power of mantra, the king, he said, give me a mantra that will protect me on my spiritual journey through the Himalayan mountains where I can achieve perfection. So actually Garga Samhita describes how Saubhari Muni gave the king a very, very powerful mantra, a kavacha, let us say, a protective mantra, called the Shri Yamuna Kavacha. The Shri Yamuna Kavacha. And I found that mantra in the scripture. I found it. And I've been chanting it for 14 days. So no mishap here on the mountain. Of course, this is a very auspicious area, as I mentioned, Loma Rishi and Pandavas. So I thought all of you might want to hear that kavacha today. Perhaps even memorize it. So all of us can be protected from the brambles and the thorns on the way to home, to Braj, to the spiritual world. So get your pen, pencils, get your paper. Here's this divine kavacha. Text 1. Shri Mandata said, O fortunate one, please give me the supremely splendid kavacha of Sri Yamuna, Lord Krishna's queen. I will always keep it very carefully within my heart. Text 2. Sri Saubhari Muni said, O noble-hearted king, please hear the Yamuna Kavacha, which protects one from all dangers and brings to one the 4 goals of life. Text 3. One should meditate on dark, 4-armed, beautiful, lotus-petaled-eyed Yamuna, who is seated on a chariot. Then one should meditate on the Yamuna Kavacha. Text 4. A brahmana should bathe, face the east, refrain from conversation, offer the sadhya prayers, sit in the svastika asana posture on a kusha mat, tie his hair with kusha grass, and recite the following words. Text 5. May Yamuna always protect my head. May Krishna always protect my eyes. May Shyam always protect my eyebrows. May Nakavasini always protect my nose. Text 6. May Paramananda Rupini always protect my cheeks. May Krishna Vavamsa Shambhuta always protect my ears. Text 7. May Kalindi always protect my lips. May Surya Kanyaka always protect my chin. May Yama Vashva always protect my neck. And may Mahanadi always protect my chest. Text 8. May Krishna Priya always protect my back. May Tatini always protect my arms. May Shushroni always protect my loins. And may Charudharshana always protect my hips. Text 9. May Rambhoru always protect my thighs. May Angri Bedini always protect my knees. May Rashashwari always protect my ankles. And may Papa Praharini always protect my feet. Text 10. May Paripur Natamapriya always protect me from everything that is inside, outside, above, below, in the 8 directions, and in the entire universe. Text number 11. A poor person, a pauper, who 10 times recites with devotion this very wonderful Yamuna Kavacha, becomes wealthy. Text 12. A wise brahmachari who eats little and for 3 months recites this Kavacha attains a great kingdom. Of this there is no doubt. Text 13. What is not attained within 3 months by a person who chants this Kavacha 110 times with devotion? What is not attained for such a person who chants this Kavacha 110 times with devotion? Text 14, which for us is the most important blessing from chanting this kavacha. A person who rises early and recites this kavacha attains the result of all pilgrimages. At the end of his life, he goes to Sri Goloka Vrindavan, the supreme abode, which even the great yogis cannot attain. Hare Krishna. Such wonderful armor that we've put on ourselves to protect ourselves so we can just peacefully chant Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Or go out in the streets and chant. We'll get more mercy like that because Mahaprabhu will be pleased. So, after receiving this mantra in the right ear, the king bowed down and he released all his servants, his ministers, his soldiers, his army, and he left behind all the members of his extended family. And he took off his royal robes and all their insignia, and he put on the torn clothes, the torn saffron clothes of a sadhu, those clothes which he found abandoned on the street. And then he turned and started walking alone north to the Himalayas. And there he lived a life of penance and austerity and devotion to the Supreme Lord. Such noble persons, a king, to the Himalayas to live like a sadhu and achieve perfection. And what about our Saubhari Muni? Well, all's well that ends well. And that's Krishna consciousness, because the end result is something wonderful. Remember Prabhupada told me, so much endeavor in this material world, but when I take you back to Godhead, everything will be easy and sublime. So we just tolerate all the imperfections of this world by continuing our seva to Guru and Gauranga. So Saubhari Muni, well, he continued to enjoy the heavenly pleasures surrounding him until he too, in time, became dissatisfied with the so-called happiness in this world. And a very strong desire came in his heart to love the Lord, Radha and Krishna. Now, our previous acharyas and the Shastras, they can describe these things much better than me. So here's a wonderful passage in Shastra describing the transformation of Saubhari Muni exactly as it came about and why. And you will love it. It is stated, and I'm quoting here now, the influence of Govardhan Hill in Sri Vrindavan Dham, Krishna's eternal abode, gradually purified the heart of Saubhari Muni. One day he found himself sitting alone, contemplating the cause and the results of his fall down. Finally, the spirit of devotional detachment again rose within his heart. He then left his opulent household and followed by his devoted wives, accepted the Vanaprastha order, and returned to Sonuraka, on the banks of the Yamuna River, where in time he and his beloved wives, the princesses, by his power, all attained ultimate perfection and went back home, back to Godhead. Hare Krishna. Isn't that wonderful? And he was in the Vanaprastha order of life. Previously he was a sadhu in the river, and we can imagine, sure, he'll make it. But it's wonderful that, he was a grihastha, then he was Vanaprastha, and in that Vanaprastha ashram, along with his wives, by his power it's actually described, they all went back home, back to Godhead. Grihe tako bhani tako. Whether one's a tyagi, a renounced person living in the forest, or whether one is a grihastha, a devotee of Krishna, living at home with his wife and family, if that person has the mission of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in his heart, if he's a Gaura Bhakta, Bhaktivinoda Thakur says, I take the dust of that person's feet upon me. The tyagi and the householder, I put that dust Griha tako, mani tako. Hare Krishna. Like one time Rao said, my Guru Maharaj, he created an army of sannyasis. I've created an army of grihastras. We're taking over the world. And we see in the beginning of our movement, it was grihastra couples going to England and France and Germany and Tokyo and Australia. So Hare Krishna, such a wonderful international society for Krishna consciousness we have. Saving the world by the chanting of Hare Krishna. And so, my dear Prabhus, this gives us yet another place to visit during our next Kartik Parikrama. We're always talking about the next Kartik Parikrama, but it's what's in our hearts, right? After hearing all these glories of Vrindavan and the sadhus and the rishis and the sages who spent time there, this is beating in our hearts very strongly now. Vrindavan, Vrindavan, Vrindavan. And Prabhupada many times requested us to come. So we will, have no doubt, we will one day be together again in Ramanreti, just outside our beloved Krishna Balaram Mandir. And we'll pay obeisances on the asphalt to the dust of Brajabhumi, asking for her grace. We'll ask the grace of the 5 personalities who grant entrance into Vrindavan, and then we'll go. And we'll do this. We'll do our Kartik Parikrama, perhaps with Giriraj Swami, Bibi Govinda Maharaj, Bhakti Bringa Govinda Maharaj, Bhakti Chaitanya Swami, Dinabandhu Prabhu. These are all my Parikrama gurus. And we'll have Charatma Prabhu there. We'll have Bharahari Prabhu there to sing. And I can just see the tears flowing from the eyes of the devotees, because you should remember all this. We're supposed to remember. Shravanam Kirtanam Krishna Shmaranam means to remember. We should take this knowledge and we should remember it. We should think of it again and again and again, repeat it, because it's ever fresh. And this will increase our desire. And then that day, I can't imagine what that will be like. And we'll have to pick a place. Maybe we'll take a piece of paper and put some holy places down and put our finger down. And what if we come up with Sonaraka? Great. We'll start with Sonaraka, because actually it's not far from where our Krishna Balaram Mandir is. Actually, my house is not far either. It's a hop, skip, and a jump there. You start the Parikrama Marg, and then you go to the left, down by that Varaha temple. You take a left and you go to a village, which is not far from the Yamuna, and there's this compound where there's these sadhus living, very nice sadhus. I've gone there many times. I've known them since the early 70s. They're still there. Some of them have passed away gloriously. But that place is there, and we've been there with our Parikrama party as well. Those of you know, you remember. So maybe we'll go to Sonaraka, that holy site, that Leela Snan, where Saubhari Muni started and where he ended up with his illustrious wives, and they all achieved perfection. Now, it's said that while there, when you visit that tirtha, you should chant the holy names and meditate on the following topics, all of which we covered today. The trap of misplaced compassion, the consequences of Vaishnav aparat, and the power of Sri Vrindavan Dham to purify us and help us attain the lotus feet of Radha and Krishna. Hare Krishna. So regarding the mercy of our beloved Vrindavan Dham and how dear it is to us, I would like to finish today with the following verse. It's short, but it's pregnant with knowledge and realization. It's by our favorite Sri Prabodhananda Saraswati from his Sri Vrindavan Mahimamrita. The chapter is Dashanam Satakam. I'll finish with this verse. O Vrindavan, O crowning bliss of Radha and Krishna, to me, always be like a mother, a father, a good friend, a brother, a kind relative, a love, a protecting devata, a guru, an observant eye, prana, the greatest treasure, the best nectar, a good son, And please, Shri Vrindavan Dham, always remain within the depths of my heart. Hare Krishna. Thank you, Prabhu. It's so wonderful to be back again, exploring these wonderful forests of Vrindavan. And I'll do my duty to all of you here in this mountainous region of Maharashtra. I'll get right back to the books and prepare my next lecture. Thank you for the service. See you in a few days. Shri Shri Gaur Nitai ki, Shri Shri Krishna Balaram ki, Shri Shri Radha Shama Sundar ki, Vrindavaneshwari Srimati Radharani ki, Shri Prabhupada ki, Saubhari Muni ki, Yamuna River ki, Yamuna Kavacha ki, back home, back to Godhead ki. Take everybody with us. We won't leave anyone behind. That will give the greatest pleasure to Sri Prabhupada. See you in a few days. Haribol. Hare Krishna. Thank you.